Michael Walker is a political commentator and contributing editor at Novara Media, an independent media outlet, and he comes to us from London. Good day. Help us make sense of this moment. Tensions gripping the UK. Give us the big picture. How are you reflecting on this moment?
Well, I suppose as your reporters have just sort of demonstrated, I think very well, today is really the first day that feels like we're getting some positive news, which is that there were fears that there would be far-right demonstrations. I shouldn't really call them demonstrations, far-right riots around the country. And most of them haven't come to pass. So there have been a few scuffles here or there, but it's normally it seems to be in sort of the double figures. So there are literally places where you see sort of a line of police around four guys looking like they're sort of in a far-right outfit, and then you've got thousands of counter-protesters. So it's very clear that the spirit of the nation is not with the rioters of the past 7 days. That said, I mean, it's not a time for complacency. I don't think anyone expected to see those scenes that we saw on Saturday and Sunday. Of course, most dramatically and most terrifyingly, a couple of hotels being broken into and set on fire by rioters, and they were hotels which were housing people who were asylum seekers. So that could have been a massacre. Lots of people could have died. So that's why, I mean, ethnic minority people in this country are at the moment completely terrified because they don't know where these riots are going to pop up next. Again, that said, we really don't know to what extent we should expect more of these riots in the future, or whether they have fizzled out. There's a lot of uncertainty at the moment.
A lot of uncertainty. And surprisingly, I mean, what have these riots laid bare?
Well, I suppose the extent to which there are this many violent, racist people in the country. And again, this is not a huge section of society, and the vast majority of people reject what they're doing. But when I first saw, I have to say, sort of as a journalist on my show, those riots in Southport, so after you had a grieving community, the horrific murder of 3 young girls, and then based on misinformation, you had riots there. One of the things I said on my show was, no one is going to see this and think, I want to get involved, right? Because these people look horrific. They've interrupted a community when it is grieving to cause trouble based on lies. Now, I thought, why would anyone want to join that movement? But clearly there were some people who wanted to join a movement such as that. I think what's also scared people is that, especially in some of these towns, say Rotherham, where you had the hotel set on fire, and you've also seen other towns where residential properties, which I think is pretty terrifying, sort of had their windows smashed, and then people throwing things at mosques, is that the police haven't been able to get there in time with the numbers that they need, really to keep people safe. So obviously, if you live in one of those communities, then you aren't going to have that much confidence that if the worst does happen and you do end up with far-right rioters on your street, that the cops will be able to stop them. So I think there has been a bit of a let's say, an undermining of trust in the authorities to keep people safe.
Mm-hmm. What do you make of the handling of the government and also how the opposition has responded to these riots?
Yeah, so, I mean, the government have kept their messaging to be very much one about law and order. Keir Starmer has called these rioters far-right thugs, but there hasn't exactly been sort of an outpouring of messaging around anti-racism. I think the Labour Party, newly elected, want to depoliticise this. I don't think they think that immigration is sort of an issue they really want to raise the salience of. Now, I personally think that's a bit of a mistake. I think it's clearly racist riots, and they should come out a bit stronger, saying racism is just it's not just lawlessness that's the problem here, it's also racism. The Conservative Party are currently a little bit all over the place. So you've got leadership candidates, because obviously Rishi Sunak has now resigned as leader, leadership candidates such as Robert Jenrick, who are going out and saying incredibly inflammatory things. So this morning, he ultimately rolled it back, but this morning he said that anyone who says Allahu Akbar in the street should be immediately arrested, which is obviously completely outrageous and racist. He was, I should say, almost immediately sort of condemned across large parts of the political spectrum, has now said he only meant if it was chanted in sort of intimidating situations. Again, an untenable position. But he's pitching himself to the right. There have been other Tory politicians, such as Priti Patel, who she has actually used, we should say, lots of the rhetoric that could be accused of inflaming this. She's talked about lefty lawyers, she's talked about invasions, but she has said, look, this is nothing to do with previous protests. These are thugs, these are rioters, and we need to clamp down really hard on them. She hasn't sort of flirted with them in the same way that some politicians have.
Is this Islamophobia institutionalized in Britain?
Probably. I mean, we need to have perspective here to some degree. I don't think this is a moment to sort of everyone sort of say, oh, Britain is this incredibly racist place and anyone who's not white should be scared to be here. I don't think that's the case. I think what you're seeing from these counter demonstrations today is that the vast majority of people in Britain welcome the fact that we have a multicultural society. At the same time, I think what we have had in this country is, especially from the Conservative Party, very much a willingness to flirt with, to energize, to sort of give succor to Islamophobes. And that has created an environment where people feel empowered to sort of attack and be prejudicial towards Muslims. So clearly there is a serious problem. At the same time, there is, elements of multiculturalism in Britain which do work.
I just want to get a final thought from you, if I may. A lot of people talking about the role of social media, pointing the finger at social media as one of the main culprits for, being that spark that set off this unrest. I'm just wondering, are we overestimating the role of social media, especially going by what you just outlined?
So I think there is a vested interest among some in the British establishment to blame social media because then it's someone else's problem. I mean, we do have a right-wing press in this country who have sort of put many inflammatory stories on their front pages. We've also got mainstream politicians, especially from the Conservative Party, who have flirted very strongly with Islamophobia and very inflammatory anti-immigrant rhetoric. At the same time, I think it's clear that one of the reasons these protests have been so unpredictable is because they're organised on platforms such as Telegram. And then also added to that, you have Elon Musk buying X. And he has, especially by replying to far-right Twitter accounts, really, really amplified the worst, most base kinds of racist conspiracies. So, yes, there are some people who want to overstate the role of social media, but I think it also can't be ignored.
All right, Michael Walker, political commentator and contributing editor at Novara Media, talking to us from London. Thank you very much for your time and your insights. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.